Very good evening to all of you. I think we should start now and start on time because we have lots to look forward to. So a very good evening to all of you. I'm Shashank Sinha. I work as an independent researcher, and on behalf of At the Rate of Crossroads and India International Center, we welcome you all to today's very fascinating discussion on a very unique aspect. At the Rate of Crossroads is an informal and emerging collective, basically. We started sometime last year, and this is the fourth event in the series that we're doing in collaboration with the India International Center. We began with an event called Delhi and its Slick Past. Then the second one was on a larger dimension about the relationship between the Mauryas and the Achaemenids, which is about a Persian palace in Patna. The third one was on recalibrating partition. Today we have this fourth event on doing theory in India. And on August 21st, we have an event on decoding Bangladesh, which would be in conference room number 2. What At the Rate of Crossroads does, it broadly talks about intersections and connections. Broadly speaking, 3 overlapping set of intersections or connections. First is between the sciences and the humanities and social sciences, how the conversations between the two impact the way we look at things. Second, it's about disciplines and perspectives, basically, and how these discipline and perspectives, which means, basically multiple ways of looking at a subject, using similar, related, different, or comparative geographies, time frames, frameworks, vocations, vantage points to arrive at different understandings of things. And the third one is this about intersections between the academia and the public to explore critical themes and debates in such a way that we reach out to a wider constituency of people, not just the subject experts, but also reach out to students, teachers, researchers, and the interested audience. So today's event is about during theory in India. And this is a very unique aspect, and most of them who have not been so familiar with the topic, we've always been very curious about certain aspects and certain questions which continue to bother us, certain aspects which relate to the theory and practice, which are more generic and sometimes very geography specific as well. And there are many questions which are continuously going on. One, how do we do politics or theory? How do you theorize politics and society? Second, can certain societies exist without developing ways of thinking about themselves? Or the related idea is about, can certain societies be bereft of theorizing, basically? And the related part also, the third question is that does theory or does theorizing is a craft or a skill which needs to be learned? And when applied to the Indian context or on a more practical side or a practice side, there are more questions, How relevant are the Western frameworks, basically? Do local geocultural contexts play a role? Do social realities, historical experiences, or, basically the local cultural traditions matter? So to deliberate upon all these complex issues, we have today with us a panel of experts. There are around 5 speakers that we have, and they'll talk about different ways. Is there a way, are there models which can adequately represent this theory part in India? If so, then what are the problems? How do we do it? And on that note, I would like to introduce our speakers, but first of all, thank them for agreeing to be a part of today's program. And let me just first introduce the speakers. We'll have inaugural remarks by Dr. Maninder Thakur, but I'll request later Professor Mohanty to do that, conduct the proceedings. We have Dr. Maninder Thakur, as you would know, he teaches at Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We have Professor Savita Singh, who is Professor Gender and Development Studies, Women's Studies and Feminist Thought at IGNOU, New Delhi. We have Dr. Dhananjay Rai, who is Associate Professor and Head of Department of Gandhian Thought and Peace Studies, School of Social Sciences, Central University of Gujarat. And then we have Professor Hilal Ahmed, who is Professor at the Center for Study of Developing Societies, New Delhi. And in the form of a chairperson, I would not like to, use a formal institutional affiliation to define Professor Mohanty, Professor Manoranjan Mohanty, but I would rather use that he's been a scholar, a thinker, a philosopher, a mentor to many people who've been here, and an institution builder. And on that note, may I invite all of you to the dais today. No, I'll sit there. And may I now please request Professor Mohanty to conduct the proceedings. Thank you.
Very happy to begin the proceedings of this very important discussion. And what Sasank Sinha mentioned as the purpose of or purposes of Crossroads, they fit so well to our enterprise. Perhaps all three dimensions are represented in this. Well, I don't think this group needs more introduction to the people who are present here. Therefore, I will not waste time on that. Because, yeah. This is an important occasion for an intellectual movement that has a history of, some would say 2 or 3, 4, or even 5 decades. 2 if you start from the Creative Theory Colloquium series, which started in IIC. 5 if we trace this initiative to our refusal to line up behind the so-called behavioral revolution. That was 5 decades ago. I think many of you didn't have to encounter that onslaught, but we did, and we withstood. 4 decades history, if we take the curriculum reforms initiatives in DU Political Science program. Ashish is present here, Ashish Nandi, who was part of our many discussions leading to the curriculum reforms. Many colleagues in CSDS, they were part of that initiative. So and what were the reforms about? They have something to do with what we are doing all these years, and especially this enterprise. 3 decades ago, if we see, then it would be the establishment of the Developing Countries Research Center, which was most active in the 1980s. And that had very clear markers to describe the beginnings, origins, and character of doing theory in the new context, doing theory in India, taking up the issues that we are going to discuss today. 2 experiences shaped our journey. Interacting with people's movements and trying to theorize on their work and articulations. That was the most important input into our journey. Ashish is here and Neera is not around here. And all these people were part of that experience very deeply. The interaction with the people's movements. Besides going to the field and taking up studies, we started an exciting new program, the annual Grassroots Politics Colloquium. It continued for over 20 years. That was one experience. Interaction with the movements. Well, Madhulika Banerjee was the convener of the grassroots politics colloquium for most of those years. She just entered, so I was about to say that. And the second experience was a deliberate effort to study non-Western societies. So politics of developing countries, or in many ways they were described. And that was our deliberate attempt to study non-Western societies. I studied China, East Asia, some colleagues studied Africa. And when we started attending international conferences, we interacted with scholars from Brazil and other countries, so we invited them. That's how we have this 30-year-old interaction with first Theotonio dos Santos, who is no more, but that group from Rio de Janeiro continues to interact with us. And now we are all these non-Western countries contacts, we are now carrying forward in the Bandung network globally today. So these two experiences, the grassroots politics colloquium and study of Asia, Africa, Latin America, ASAFLA we called it, taught us how to question received knowledge, how to understand and capture the rich body of ideas from people's struggles on the ground in India and throughout the world, particularly in the non-Western world, but also in the Western world. But their movements also had their very significant implications. This is how creative theory slowly emerged. From concrete conditions on the ground, explicitly or implicitly, and that's where the theoretician's insight and creative capacity is relevant. These insights were routinely missed by the prevailing frameworks of knowledge. Critique of all forms of dominance, colonial, caste, class, gender, religion, ethnic, and some yet to be discovered or realized. All those forms of dominance. Fighting against that was the fundamental premise of this initiative. Fighting domination and seeking freedom, seeking liberation. But aspirations to realize the creative potential of individuals, groups, and regions by eliminating constraints and producing or creating facilities or affirming conditions meant constant pursuit of new possibilities. New possibilities. Underline that. That is the motivating principle underlying this initiative, creative theory. We have 4 flag bearers of this intellectual movement here and many in the audience, equally important, many in the audience. Their work already demonstrate what I just talked about and many other dimensions which I had no time to refer to. And these are practitioners of creative theory and many others in the audience. And therefore, this is a great occasion. And now with this, I invite one of the flag bearers, I think a very important one, Manindra Thakur of JNU, from whose student days till today, he has been the most creative fighting spirit and creative spirit in this initiative. He will call them inaugural remarks, call them the perspective statement. Manindra, thank you very much.
Kind of theory we are trained in or the theory that we are doing. And we are also not happy, as Yogenji says, with the way we offer theory to those who consume theory. So our consumers are also not happy with us, and we are not happy either with that. So we are struggling to think of something very differently. The previous generation philosophers who have tried to raise questions on Indian theory have raised serious questions. We have learned from them, but we have also questioned them. We would like to question them. So why are we doing this creative theory? As I said, we are dissatisfied with what we have been doing. And that goes on till now, and probably will continue being dissatisfied. Also, we take those comments very seriously, like Parekh saying that India doesn't have political theory, or somebody saying that Indian theorists are doing mimicry. It's kind of cognitive mimicry or derivative discourse, whatever. We don't agree with them. And I think we also go beyond those questions. I don't think the question is whether we have theory or not. I think we do have theory in our own way, and we have to learn to do theory in our own way. There are difficulties in doing theory, no doubt about it. One of the difficulties is the lack of confidence of not only ours. I don't have time to explain the dialogue that I had with scholars who had said that they didn't have confidence to write something very different. So probably that is the problem with people of this reason. But what are we going to do? What are we doing? I think on few things we are very clear that this we are not doing. For instance, creative theory should not be considered as a post-colonial theory or as a decolonial theory. I think we are not rejecting these arguments, but we want to go beyond that. I remember Professor Randir Singh used to ask this question to us: how long will you remain post-colonial? And how much time will you take? Now we should ask, how much time shall we take in decolonizing ourselves? So maybe we should have confidence to go beyond them and start doing certain kind of theories. Second thing is that we want to go beyond being critical and should be creative. Like for long we have been saying that there has been cognitive rupture, we could not continue with our own theoretical frames. But how long shall we keep saying that? As I said, that a lot of scholars who make this argument go to some extent, then take a U-turn. Then they again repeat the same argument that colonialism has ruptured our thought process. I think that time is over. New generations are confident enough to go beyond that and create new ideas. So it's creative. It's not only critical, it's not only post-colonial or decolonial, it's beyond that. It's a creative. One of the questions that keeps coming to us is about the universal. I mean, very short, I'm giving some signpost that our theoretical frame has. On the question of universal, our position is that we do not reject universal. We can't work without universal. But we question all established universals. And that questioning is continuous. So we would argue for emergentist universal, constantly emerging universal. We do not claim that our universal is the best universal or the final universal, but we also don't accept anybody else's universal as final universal. So we invite for a dialogue on universals. What would be the method of that? The term that we use these days is called democratic negotiation. We believe that human beings are homo creativus. Wherever we are, we use our reflexive capacity to solve our problem that generates knowledge. And whatever kind of knowledge produced wherever in the world, that is a common resource of humanity as a whole. And we must engage them without engaging through power. We must ask two questions to all knowledge systems. One, how much explanatory capacity does it have? And two, how much liberative potential it has? These are two questions that should be guiding our negotiation process with different kinds of knowledge traditions. It is not a synthesis. It is not kind of finding a middle ground. It is big critical debate which lead us to creating new ideas. So we are looking for new ideas. What are the intellectual resources we would like to access? Of course, the first one is engaging with civilizations. All civilizations, including Indian civilization, our own knowledge tradition, and we take that as civilizational discourse, and within that we try to understand that. That doesn't mean that we reduced everything to relativism, but we would say that there is a kind of context of emergence of certain ideas, and we take cognizance of that. Second is deep engagement with Indian intellectual traditions. The debate is going on these days. I think one perspective is complete rejection of Indian tradition, which I don't think we would agree with. Other perspective is indigeneity, that it is indigenous, therefore important. I don't think that is also that we will agree with that. Third is identity assertion, that this is our knowledge, therefore it is important. We would say that none of them is important. What is important is whether that knowledge is relevant for a struggle for humanity or not. Can that solve the problem of humanity today or not? So our horizon is not India, it's a universal. I think Hilal will make more comments on that. And the third is, as Professor Monti mentioned, engaging with people's struggle. Not that we idealize that, not that we think that that's the only way to do it, but whatever struggle is going on, we would like to engage with that, be critical to that, but also draw our conceptual categories, our theories from there to explain things. And the last one is engaging with cultural expressions. I think for long we have ignored literature. So engaging with literature, and literature of all kinds, all languages, from there I think we can learn a lot. Social science, I believe, arrived a little late on the horizon. For instance, if we look at the contemporary writings, literary writings, signs are very clear that we are living in a dystopian world. But social science is still not debating about it. So probably that engagement is necessary. And there are many questions that we have. We don't have answers of many questions. For instance, we have question about what kind of methodological innovations we have to do to engage with this fast-changing reality. What kind of theorization we now need to do with the human-technology relationship? So much is changing there. What kind of new struggle we have to visualize for saving democracy today, and globally, not only in one country or two countries. Then on the question of identity politics, I think our theorizations have really not been very well. We need to see if we can retain the importance of identity, yet transform them for liberative struggle. How do we do that? Then of course, ecology and other issues are there. Human-nature relationships have to be thought differently. And the last is, I think all major utopias have collapsed. And that is one of the things that we are facing at this moment. So what will be the new utopia? What kind of new utopia we can imagine? And that's where I sometimes feel that probably we have to think of new prasthantraya. So maybe Marx, Gandhi, and Ambedkar could be three different paradigms among which we have to do certain kind of negotiations to arrive on new utopia. So these are the issues that we have in hand. We don't think that we have answers to them. We only invite everybody to participate in this struggle and create a community, a discursive community where we constantly think and engage. I think we are making 5 moves. I'll just take 1 more minute. It is an invitation to recover the confidence to theorize. That's the first thing. We need to move from borrowed concepts to creation of concepts. We have to create new concepts. We have to, the next creative theory colloquium is on concepts. From where and how do we get new concepts? Third, to move from disciplinary isolation to intellectual dialogue with different disciplines, movements, and common people. Fourth, to move from critique to creativity. And fifth, to think with India, but never only for India. So these are the 5 moves creative theory, I guess, intends to make from my perspective, but people may have different opinions, and that is the beauty of creative theory. Thank you very much.
In creative theory, we can take things one by one. So for today, what I'm going to do is to place our theoretical position for everybody to see how difficult it is to do creative theory. It is for no reason that we are disagreeing so much, but in spite of our disagreements, we come together. The next colloquium is going to be our 13th colloquium, in which we have discussed almost every topic under the sun or sky. So we've been working very hard on it. The last colloquium was about Indian political theory, challenges and possibilities. And there was just so overwhelming presence. So many people came to, because everyone is concerned about it. They want to know what is political theory, Indian political theory, if there is one. In my view, there is one. And I've been saying this for a long time. Why I say any community that is thinking, writing, debating, they do have a theory. This is a universal which may not be epistemologically pressed for others to also consider, but it is always assumed that under that kind of consensus about discussing, that we all come together. So in that sense, I think we have made it very difficult for ourselves, saying that we don't have a political theory. We are the ones who are making all the time this claim that we have a strong language of mimicry or replication, that we are under colonial star all the time. I don't think so. That is why we are doing creative theory. It is to deny this overwhelming burden of colonial oppression that we accept very easily. So, what has been the way for us to do political theory, but we have not articulated? Perhaps, Manindra is talking about that. So, I am making this as a public forum. I'm making this claim that in India, we have often, even rebuffed by replicative language, we have often had another language in which we have thought. And that language, I say, is interpretive. But in our group of creative theorists, we want to even move beyond that, which means that we have to make a shift from hermeneutics to critical creative position. So the moment that we want to achieve in creative theory is the moment of kinesis. And this is what I will talk about today, how it happened, because it is our major concern that when we do political theory, it must not only generate objective knowledge, that it must transform us who are doing political theory and those who are affected by it, or those who read it. So the moment of transformation is sort of expected by us, and we want that we should be away from this accusation that there's a poverty of political theory in India. I give all the respect to people, big people, but I really think that article itself, when we were debating, I found it a very poor article. It was not even articulated properly. If somebody is accusing a huge civilization like Indian civilization of not having a language of political theory, that should have been done in a much better way. But it was a very thinly done thing. It was like an accusation. So we reject that kind of thing also. So what is the starting point for us? For me at least, I don't know about Manindra and others, but this I have also made it very clear in all our colloquium and other forums of discussion, that there is a moment in our doing the way we do political theory, there is a moment of what we call thematization of ontology. And I'm going to talk about this today, and I think it will make a lot of sense for the questions that we want to sort of dismiss in a way, polite way, or answer in our infallible manner. This particular thematization of ontology does two things. One is that we are out of the empire of epistemology, that is Western epistemology. Thematization of ontology arises at the moment of overcoming of epistemology. These are moments that are taking place in Western political theory, which affects us very, very much. So overcoming of epistemology, a debate took place in a very serious manner, and very important thinkers like Habermas, Dalemar, Charles Taylor, you think of any big names at that time, they were all involved in that. And it was not colonizing for us, it was very damaging for the Western civilization itself. This scienticization, the part of Gestalt, as Heidegger had said, the rule of technology, all of that, they were not themselves very sure that it can be carried on and we should enrich us as a civilization, or as nations, or as societies. So two things happen when in India I'm saying let's thematize ontology, that we don't have to have a more serious debate on Western dominance through epistemology, through the rule of epistemology, because we can take their arguments which are very strong, and use it for ourselves. And as Manindra has been pointing out, this will not mean replication. This will only mean using resources, universal resources available, and they will not affect our theorization in the way that it will in fact affect our authenticity. Okay, so this is one thing. Second thing, once we begin to thematize ontology, we get a chance in the world of philosophers and theorists. We get a chance to take our own context seriously. That is to say, meaningfully. It is not the objective factual knowledge that we want to create, though factual knowledge gets created by the way, while we are doing this kind of serious theorizing. But go back to our resources, go back to our context for the meaningfulness of doing political theory. Because meaning is something that is never diminished while we are doing, say, even more scientific theories. Even for scientists, meaning of doing science has always been a very big question. And in natural sciences, the debate that took place, I mean, the paradigm shift, Kuhn and Feyerabend and all those people, what were they fracturing? They're fracturing the rule of that epistemological Hempelian world or human, regulation. Those are the things that they were questioning, because doing science is also a meaningful thing to do. And that will save those who are scientific in their cultural life from scientism. All right. So what it has done for us, what it will do for us, is that thematization of ontology has allowed us to know our interiority, to know where our self is located, to say that our self is not so badly affected by Western gaze. And this allows us to look for creative moments, kindnesses. And so if I don't know how much time, I wanted to read certain things because they're very well articulated. If you all agree, I'll just read that portion where it will become possible for us to see as to what is our modern ontology. Because it is from here that we theorize. And so we are not away from post-colonialism, we are away from postmodernism, we are away from the earlier decolonial theories and all that. So if you allow me, I will just read 2-3 paragraphs. So it's a first, the move is hermeneutical. That is to say, we need to interpret our texts. We need to interpret the theories that we have done so far. Hello? Whatever, even behavioralists, Professor Manti was talking about it, even that we do not want to dismiss. We will take into account their theories also, because they are part of the structure of our own thinking life. And obviously we have the freedom to reinterpret them. But that time, that context needs to be, even the replicative language needs to be entertained with respect, in the sense of taking it theoretically seriously. Just to be able to reinterpret our time and our the starting point is that in the modern era, for the whole globe, there is one thing that nobody would like not to replicate. That is to say, they would like to have across the globe, if you go. That is a moment which Hegel himself created. That is to say, moment of freedom, which was not available before modernity, before Western modernity. And so he says that freedom is unimpingible. Now, once the bourgeois man and all men and women in the world have understood that it is possible for human beings to be free, and how to be free, because the historical process, because it is based on our experience of seeking meaning of our experience and transparency for experience, which is basically the movement of Geist, self realization of the self-consciousness of the Geist, that kind of a thing, where it becomes science. There are many, many theoretical deviations, but this is important. So, hoping for achieving freedom is also to recognize our historical, contextual, and cultural potential. That is to say, freedom is always potentially given to us. And it is through historical process, it is also realizable. If we are inured to our experiences authentically. This original moment comes in every culture. That is why we have multiple modernities in the world. Why do you think we have so many modernities? It is precisely because of this. So anyway, what happened in India? That is what I want to sort of...
2 minutes?
2 minutes. Anyway, in 2 minutes, what I can say is that this movement that I'm talking about can be achieved even through expression. It's called expressivist. I have called it expressivist modernity. For example, a lot of people today will say Gandhi was anti-modern. I have argued in my work Gandhi as an expressivist modern. A lot of people have thought that Raja Ram Mohan Roy was replicative, and he did this and he did that. He wrote letters to people to get Indians be educated in English language. They all see all of this as moments of replication only. But Ram Mohan Roy was, according to me, a hermeneutical thinker whose masterly reinterpretations of Vedanta, Upanishads, created a new self, which I would call is the modern Indian self. That is to say, a self that is not afraid of authority of any orthodox group, not afraid of pursuing freedom in terms of understanding a particular text anew in one's own context. That is what hermeneutics is. And he was placed very much within this. He knew English, he knew Persian, he knew Bangla, he knew Sanskrit. This is a tremendous hermeneutical flourish that he brought. As a result, a feminist like me gets a lot of inspiration from that kind of a work. Anti-Sati bill that he helped to pursue did not come out of one day he dreamt about it or that he felt about women being burnt. He actually went through Shastras to see that there was no provision provided by our texts for women to be burnt on the pyre of the husband. And with that freedom and that authority, he challenged it and he went ahead with framing of this bill. And this is a great moment for all of us who want to do a theory which is creative. Now, 1 minute and I will end it. Why do I call it kinetic? Which is the moment where it creates something out of all these interpretations. That is the moment. Now, there is a thinker that I worked with, his name is Roy Bhaskar. Roy Bhaskar has given us a clue as to how creative moments arrive and when does it arrive. And he says that our reality is structured and we have layers and layers. And there is an alethic structure, one that is embedded in us, which is non-dual, where everyone becomes one in terms of understanding, in terms of vision, in terms of their humanity. And most of the times, since we know our history, we have been in a dual situation. And in duality, situation of duality, we have experienced mostly, particularly in modern times, capitalism that created alienation. So within alienating conditions of alienation, you cannot become creative. Which means that our movement, if we want to be transformative and creative, our movement has to be from structure 1, 2, 3, he actually names it, and he has different theories of dialectics and transcendental dialectics and this and that. It is, we have to come down and we have to be in touch with our ground state where everyone feels the same way. People feel they need change, they need goodness, and they need freedom. These are undeniable goods, super goods that all human beings want. And it is in desiring that and in realizing that a state of non-duality can be achieved where we become creative and free. Thank you so much.
I think interpreting reality to transforming it. A whole range of possibilities you have indicated. Thank you. Now Hilal Ahmed.
शांक थैंक यू, मोनिका जी थैंक यू, आप ही को थैंक यू बोलूँगा, बाकी अपने लोगों को थैंक यू बोलने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. सो आई एम हेयर टू मेक अ फ्यू clarifications and try to rethink the idea of agreement. Why? Because the issues that are covered by Maninji in his introduction, the 5 things which he indicated, are not merely done by him. There are a lot of literature that is coming out on these 5 issues. Yogen Bhai's Ganrajya Ka Swadharm, Maninji's own book Gyan Ki Rajniti, Professor Kaviraj's Bangla book, the English version is nearly coming. It's called Search for Paradise. And Nivedita Menon's book, Secularism as Misdirection. I think we have now the first point which you made about recovering the confidence that we can do theory. I think that we are in a process to achieve it. So what I'm going to do basically to have a big canvas and bold strokes, and to talk about agreement, because whenever we say agreement, The opposite to this is disagreement. I'm not going into disagreement. How can we actually rethink the idea of agreement and then expand the scope of it? So in order to save time, and English is not my language, so I'm going to read it out. The title Doing Theory in India underlined two distinct yet interrelated issues. The act of theory, a supposedly sophisticated, intellectually sensitive, and inherently all-inclusive exercise that aims to explain complex phenomenon and to create the possibility to think the unthinkable. So that's what theory comes to us. On the other hand, India, often presented to us as a geopolitical context, an evolving civilization, a post-colonial nation, and a democratic republic. Doing theory in India thus may lead to a slightly uncomplicated, overtly positive, intellectually safe, and politically desirable conclusion that the act of theorization should not ignore the contextual dimensions. We all agree on that. In other words, we agree on two things. One, the Western theory in its varied form, whenever we say Western, we should be very careful that there is no one Western, there are multiplicity of it. Western theory dominates our intellectual discussion. Therefore, there is a need to underline the limit of Western theory by asserting the fact that Indian realities should not be treated merely as case study. To substantiate the universal applicability of Western theory. This is agreement number one, is based on the premise that theorizing in experiences require a context-specific conceptual apparatus and a culturally sensitive mode of doing theory building. Now, agreement number two. It's about what is called decolonization of theory. There is a huge literature on this subject. The central theme is simply this. Our ideas are still governed by colonial knowledge framework, hence one must strive for what K.C. Bhattacharya calls Swaraj in ideas. While agreeing to this journal observation, I wish to further expand the scope of this discussion by introducing three new themes at the end, not now. But before I start, I take a clue from Manishji's presentation. He says that poetry has a great power. So I will actually recite one of the poem by Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, and then I go back to Gandhi and Tagore debate very quickly and conclude. It's a famous poem, Pakshi और बादल. It says, ये भगवान के डाकिये हैं जो एक महादेश से दूसरे महादेश को जाते हैं. हम तो समझ नहीं पाते मगर उनकी लाई चिट्ठियाँ पेड़, पौधे, पानी और पहाड़ बाँचते हैं. हम तो केवल ये आंकते हैं कि एक देश की धरती दूसरे देश को सुगंध भेजती है और वो सौरभ हवा में तैरती हुई पक्षियों की आंखों पर तिरता है और एक देश का भाप, दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट, एक देश का भाप दूसरे देश का पानी बनकर गिरता है. नाउ दिस लास्ट लाइन, and the steam from one country falls as water in another, in my view, is very powerful theoretical statement. This line is very important because it implies that steam, a material outcome, does not remain confined to the geographical boundaries. Instead, it travels like cloud and falls water in another context and country. So, Tagore-Gandhi debate. Now I quickly move to Tagore-Gandhi debate. There are 3 or 4 parts of the debate, but I'm focusing only on one. That is during the time of non-cooperation movement. So Tagore wrote a long essay, first in Bangla and then in English. And I quote that. He says that I feel that true India is an idea, not a mere geographical fact. Is an idea. India will be victorious when this idea wins victory. The idea of Purusham, Mahatam, Aditya Varnam, Tamash Parasta, the infinite personality whose light reveals itself through the obstruction of darkness. Our fight is against this darkness. Our object is the revealment of the light of this infinite personality in ourselves. Gandhi, interestingly, disagrees on many counts with Tagore, but he agrees on this. And he says, I quote Gandhi, I want, and this is a very famous quote from Gandhi, I want a culture of all the lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off my feet by any. This is Gandhi's reply while disagreeing with Tagore's questioning the non-cooperation movement. Now, this brings us to three theses or three ideas which I wish like to present. Now, the first idea is how to look at India. In my view, and this is something which both I find Gandhi uses the metaphor of sky very creatively. Both Gandhi and Tagore. And in literature, you find that sky is something that is always seen as valuable. Now, not recently, I think 5 years ago, there was a book called Monsoon Islam by Sebastian Prince. And he makes this argument that Monsoon Islam, meaning that the ideas of Islam travel from, Middle Eastern world to Kerala and to Eastern Asia. And they actually absorb the water coming from these ideas in their various ways. So I like that metaphor. And I suggest that how should we look at India as a site, and I would call it Punya Akash, not Punya Bhumi, because all of these great personalities are not looking down, they are looking up. So it's Punya Akash. Ideas, in my view, travel like moving clouds. They certainly originate in a particular context, respond to a few specific socio-economic and cultural conditions, yet their inner logic push them to move outside. This inner strength provides them a unique philosophical value, a universalism of some kind. This is something what Manbhai just underlined. It would be therefore necessary to pay attention to this multifaceted universalism. Doing theory in India would be meaningless if we ignore the dialogical tradition that evolved historically over the centuries and shaped Indian culture or theorization. This theoretical move may be described as a constant search for a Punya Akash. Now, if this is India, in my view it's Akash, not Bhumi, then what are the sources? I use the term Ekanik. Punya Akash, the second proposal is Ekaik. Again, because the confidence is now coming that we can actually experiment something theoretically. Indian thinking, especially in the realm of modern Indian politics, is based on a strong assertion that India's sociological, religious, linguistic, and cultural diversity is not a weakness. It is, on the contrary, a uniqueness that defines India as a nation. We all agree on that. But there are two components in this formulation, and we usually ignore the second one. The first is diversity. We all agree that we are a completely diverse country. But there is another thing, that is outcome of the diversity. There is a lot of discussion on the question of diversity. However, the outcome of diversity, which establishes us as a collectivity, a reality of second order, is usually taken for granted. Doing theory in India, I suggest, should be sensitive to this emerging duality that takes away from all forms of parochialism. I call this value Anek. Now, the final is method. What could be the methodological move to do theory in India? I call it Tulnatmakta. India's public life introduces us to some of the most unexplored dynamics of modernity. Our anti-colonial struggle in its entirety not merely evoked nationalism as a cherished goal, but also proposed different possibilities to imagine an egalitarian society. Indian experiments with the idea of democracy have been equally fascinating. These experiences, no doubt, deeply rooted in the Indian context, yet there is a possibility to expand the analytical capacity of this inherently Indian explanation for doing what may be called a comparative theory, or I call it Tulnatmakta. So these are the three things which I propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Punya Akash, Ekanek, Tulnatmakta. Wonderful, the three together. Okay, our final speaker is Dhananjay Rai.
I will follow the tradition of Hilal Bhai to read my paper. But before that, I'll thank organizers to give me for this opportunity to understand what is political theory, what is creative theory, and what could be creative theory in possible conditions of sheer homogenizations and sheer standardization of knowledge system and the production. Professor Bhikhu Parikh was Vice Chancellor of one university in Baroda, MSU, and where my university is located, Central University of Gujarat. So he was a Vice Chancellor for 5 years, actually 3 years. The term in the State University is for 3 years, and he was Vice Chancellor. Second term he did not take, and he wrote, in first term he wrote a book called Marxism and Ideology, Marx and Ideology. Second volume he did not write. And I think in 1989 he wrote this Poverty of Political Theory in India. So I think the possible connection as a Vice Chancellor and academician was mismatched during his time when he was a Vice Chancellor, and there was hardly interaction with the political theorists in India, particularly Western part, because in MSU and Baroda there were lots of people who were doing political theory, and certainly they can't be dubbed as in a category of poverty or political theory. And I think in 2015, there used to be debate between us, particularly me and Hilal Bhai, or Mahindraji was siding with the Hilal Bhai, that we should not define creative theory, because both perceived that doing is liberating and defining is constraining. But I said that we should define what is creative theory, because that would give us perspectival vantage point where we are coming from in this time. So I'll read my paper, which is not lengthy, but would throw some of the points maybe at the cost of repetition. Doing creative theory involves minimalistic principles and maximalist principle. By way of minimalist principle, it ensures that contradiction is writ large in the contemporary world, which does not take an isolationist and relativist approach. Thus, dialogue amongst anti-binary heterogeneity, I suggest that we have to have dialogue amongst anti-binary heterogeneity, ensures the arrival of melange. The beginning of dialogues ensures that meaningful differences, which act as a critical catalyst against the subsumptions of orthodoxy. So I think we need to do meaningful differences. I don't think that we are doing creative theory as a site of one agreement plethora per se, but meaningful differences, because that is what is needed in this time where there is a subsumptions of orthodoxy in every possible sphere of life. So minimalist is this. Since 2014, we are doing minimalist principle. Every year on 5th and 6th September, you will have creative theory colloquium at India International Center. And this year we will have on 4th and 5th and 6th. What I am trying to understand, maximalist principle of why should we do critical theory? Why creative theory is to be done? The entire exercise attempt to explain the creative theory's maximalist approach, and I think that at this juncture, we need transversal imagination. And we do not have transversal imagination. That would not be very apt at this juncture. Creative theory pursues the recognition of, and this would be my definition of creative theory if I can define. I don't understand the category of confidence and non-confidence, but I'll try to define. Creative theory pursues the recognition of temporality while emphasizing heterodox readings to reject it as a fait accompli. Temporality is important, it can't be considered as a fait accompli. Through epistemic openness and transformative action. Recognizing the significance of anti-binary knowledge and non-acceptance of reducing structural question to oblivion. So these are some of the components of creative theory. I think creative theory is a collective project. Here, theory is not merely autobiographical. Theory is not autobiography. I don't think so that theory as an autobiography should be considered very important. And this is a contra to Nietzsche's famous position. This is a Nietzsche's position that theory is a autobiography. And according to Nietzsche, I have gradually come to realize what every great philosopher so far has been, a confession of faith on the part of its author, and a type of involuntary and unself-conscious memoir. So theory is unconscious memoir for Nietzsche. I don't think we are doing certainly that. But we are also not doing creative theory, which may go against Quentin Skinner types of theory, where reading history is excessive obsession. Reading author needs excessive obsession with the historicity and the linguistic perfectionism. So we are also not doing that. And Quentin Skinner is important, that you cannot recover the intention of author if you don't have historicity or you don't have language acumena. I think I'll go with this formulation by one scholar, and this is also debated in creative theory, that while doing theory, we need two things, intended meaning and extended meaning. And these are two important for us, that intended meaning is very, very important of any author or reality, but we also need to extended meaning of intended meaning. Both are very, very important in a contemporary time, intended meaning and extended meaning. This intended meaning and extended meaning comes from Adrian Blau, and lots of people are also doing. For example, Manindraji is doing how to understand context, contextualization, decontextualization, and recontextualization. We need to understand theory in this way. Creative theory is, as a group, offers diverse academic pursuit. As a group, we seek to extend the intended meaning of the creative theory. Professor Mohanty, when he was defining creative theory in one of his books, he says that there are four ways of defining or doing political theory. One is assimilation with mainstream Western social science paradigm. Second is critique of Western theories. Third is search for alternatives to Western theories. And fourth, he defines creative theory. According to Professor Mohanty, creative theory seeks to generate a body of knowledge rooted autonomously in one's own environment. I'll come to these important vantage point or categorization of creative theory with two caveats. One is, I suggest that every act is creative act that is a misnomer. Every act cannot be considered creative act, or that would be surplus optimism. Every act is not creative act, that would be surplus optimism. A difference is not always creative. A difference or doing things differently is not always creative, otherwise there would be serious problems. Second is, a creative act cannot be theorized as creative theory. All creative acts can't be called creative theory. And there is no rejection of the creative act, whether conscious or subconscious. The concern is much more severe. The sine qua non in the creative theory is desirous change consciously along with epistemological pursuit. I'll focus some of the features and the components of creative theory, or why I'm doing creative theory in some of my writings. One is, I consider that in my readings in last 20 years of political theory, first line or second line would be that creative theory is a spatial domain and craft reserved for the specialists. I seriously disagree. Theory is not a spatial domain or craft confined to a particular group or society. Societies, and I also agree that societies cannot be bereft of theorization. No society would be bereft of theorization. This is our problem if we are not understanding theories of societies. India is bereft of a theory that is not right position. This Orientalism is not acceptable. Second, since creativity is essentially anti-hierarchical, otherwise it would be reactionism, theory cannot be based on the simple East and West dichotomy. As I understand, every time we do not need to respond, I need to reply to the West or East dichotomy or categorization of the East and the West. That would destroy the creativity. If Western theories would not be on supreme paradigm, so maybe some of the Indian theories may be also not kept on superior paradigms. Unfortunately, the decolonization project has fallen into deep binary jingoism in several years, in last few years. Third, the concrete reality is impregnated with the major dissatisfaction. We need a concrete analysis. Vulgar relativism does not help much. So creative theory is concerned about vulgar relativism. In fact, the urge for philosophical relativism is not ipso facto solution, but at best escapism. Vulgar relativism is the best escapism. Fourth, thinking as a transformation is to be prioritized over thinking as a consumption. Creative transformation is more encouraged than creative consumption. Fifth feature of creative theory, I guess, is creativity cannot be reduced to the realm of commodity and consumption. In the new liberal sense, the purpose of creativity is defined in the realm of originality and utility. The end of originality and utility is commodity and commodification. Creativity is linked to the human species, which is a pre-commodity condition. I think that if we have to try to understand creative theory, we have to give emphasis on human being as a pre-commodity species, not a commodious species. Making creativity commodified strips it of its essence, which is unbridled initiative, immense imagination, and transformative life. Sixth is, the idea of creative theory is to propose transformation and exposing the structural limitations. Seventh, since creativity is a quintessential part of human nature, it becomes a conscious effort in the realm of theory. It proposes human creativity while explaining the structural constant. It needs to propose alternative ideas unheard of or rejected by the mainstream national imagination. While creative theory should also engage with this East and West dichotomy maybe sometime, but it should also challenge a certain form of national imaginations, because there cannot be one national imagination, there can be multiple national imaginations. Ninth, I think power of negative thinking is a very, very important. The positive thinking has actually led to the positivism. जहाँ पे सब कुछ अच्छा है, सब कुछ चलता है. I think the power of negative theory, negative thinking in a dialectical sense has to be restored. And the power of negative thinking is looking beyond the structure, looking beyond the surface. 10, the idea of political. I think the idea of political is very important. I'm not defining the concept of political in sense of friend and enemy binaries or Carl Schmithian position, but I think there should be recognition of temporal power. Temporal power is very important to understand for the dignity and rights and knowledge of people. 11th point would be that epistemological quest is very, very important for... 1 minute, I'll take 2 minutes maybe. 2 points more, that's all. Epistemological quest is very, very important for creative theory. That is beyond empiricization of knowledge or realities. Beyond theological knowledge, study of theology is a very, very important. But theology itself is a knowledge. I have serious problem and reservation. I may be wrong, I don't know. Theology should be subject of study. Theology can't ipso facto become the reference point of knowledge. Third, we need to move beyond new liberal knowledge. And we know that in India, yesterday there was a report in Indian Express or some newspaper where higher education or 70% higher education is in private domains and the private sector, where new liberal knowledge of fancy character, political science is reduced to governance, and governance is reduced to some empirical studies. That is a new liberal knowledge. And fourth point is we also be concerned about teleological position. That end is already defined for us. I think this should be challenged at a different level, that nobody should be in position to define and for everyone. That is the rejection of teleological position. And 10th and final point would be that we need transversal imagination, arrival of a new social or new imagination, which would be very, very important because as Hilal Bhai used lots of conceptual Hindi terms, I may have one liberty to use. I call it Swanya Swaraj. Swanya is Swa and Anya. There is nothing called eraser of other. And most of the liberal political theory self should be gracious enough to accept other or assimilate other. We have been reading this since last 20 years. I think that has to be changed. Other cannot be assimilated. Other will be... There should be actually presence of self and other in Swa and form. Swa and Anya. There can't be eraser of other by the self, even at any cost. Which we are looking at, we are trying to analyze democracies where other is actually in a serious crisis. So transversality is very, very important, and speaking to myself is also necessary to speak to others. If I'm speaking to myself, it is abortive if I'm not speaking to others. But why we are not speaking for others? Creative theory invites attention to social numbness. And we are seriously plagued by social numbness towards each other. And what is called an aesthetic age, where anesthesia has become important, we are not thinking about other as a part of your horizon. So creative theory demands the arrival of new social, which is based on sensitivity, disruption of one-dimensional imagination, borrowing the term from Marquez. And I think dystopia should be read as not meaningless assertion, but as anxiety for creativity. So we reject many dystopia. I don't think that dystopia should be rejected by many people. There's anxiety for creativity. Conclusion. Creative theory offers the engaged reading of temporalities while offering the hope for creative action towards the transformation of the structure. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I'm just filling in for the chairperson's role. Could we now open the floor for questions, please? You can direct the questions, be specific, please identify yourself and direct the question to specific panelists, or if you are directing it to all the panelists, please do mention that. Thank you, please.
Known creative theory group for some years and their vibrant discussions. Compared to the angst of theorizing in political theory, we suffer it more. Because in politics, you have something called a government, which cuts across cultures. Economists have economy as this object of study. We are still trying to find an equivalent of society. Do you have any word in Indian languages? Samaj in Hindi. In Tamil, Samuga is not at all society. So I'm just trying to say my reflections come from this kind of a search, which I will share with you. And what I'm responding to is what I heard in this panel. You have deliberations over a very long period of time. I was looking in the points presented by Manindra and all of you for language. You spoke about literature. Where is language and the linguistic diversity itself as a way of cognitive articulation in this discussion of creative theory? Like I told you, there's no equivalent for the word society in which Habermas or your Marx or civil society debates. There are similar debates in Tirukkural, in Kambaramayana, but they don't use the word. Samugam means something else. Now, why? So when we are talking about theorizing and thinking, is the diversity of language and the language in which our thoughts articulated not so not very fundamental? What is the difference between Valmiki Ramayana and Kambaramayana? A.K. Ramanujam has talked about it. So that is my first question. If I had missed it in your presentations, please enlighten me. My second question is, while we are engaging with theory, what does creative theory colloquium mean by theory itself? Because we have philosophizing. I study traditional Indian medicine. There, a distinction is made between tattva, which is philosophy, shastra, which is theory, and vyavahara, which is everyday practice. The first doesn't change in medicine. Theories change, and vyavahara keep changing all the time. So, they have a distinction. So, what do we mean by theory? Before we answer whether there is something called theory, I think in all your articulations, you mean something different and insightful about theory. Maybe one can engage with that. And lastly and finally, I'm sure the title of the panel is Doing Theory, but would you think given the diversity of your expertise, you would like to restrict yourself only to political theory? That itself is a disciplinary division. So theory, social theory or social science theory will actually fit the diversity of your debate more than political theory could be one component of that. This will be my humble submission.
I've got 3 quick points, and then as it was always said, that I'll come back to asking you, Professor Monty, like this. Now, the first one is doing creative theory, social theory, or political theory. Given where we are, temporality is fine, but a spatial location just doesn't allow us the liberty to not accept that there is a concrete reality of power and inequality. Now, using terms like creative, great, gives us a horizon of optimism. But why shed the burden of critique, which has been that power that has allowed us to live on long after we've left the academia? And many of us have made meanings of our life, of our interrogation of structures of power, only because we had the power of critique from whatever we were taught by, the syllabi and the curriculum that Professor Monty so lovingly engaged with Professor Ashish Nandi about. So concrete reality, power and inequality retain their centrality. Second that I want to relatedly state is that the power of critique itself is extremely important. Therefore, when you define, I think I belong more to the Dhananjay side of the divide. I am glad that this panel here had a divide. The power of critique is extremely important. Now, why is it important? Even those who were taking us south from citadels of the north, they took us that far but still were in the evolutionary frame. It still required those who were doing more of theory from within Africa, people like Ferguson, talking about depoliticizing development, talking about the kind of things that our course on politics of developing countries, etc., was doing in India here. And you were prefiguring much of what was to appear as critique in much of the global north as coming up from the south. Now, that came about because of critique. So I think we are at best at a moment, if I can say, in terms of theorizing, we have the power of critique on our side, for sure. And the second thing is that we have an assemblage of concepts that is allowing us to interrogate capitalism far better, and which makes us go back to say, you can read tons of reading on neoliberalism. The ones that make the best sense are the ones that are talking about the critical interrogation of capitalism in its unity of political and economic power wielded in an asymmetric way on the classes that are now the precarious, informal, and laboring poor of what is tentatively referred to as the global south. Let's agree to interrogate this. So I'm not willing to, for the sake of calling this creative, leave aside any of the classical political economy terms. And I think the centrality of the critique of capitalism is what allows us to live on. I want to conclude by saying that I'm very glad that Dhananjay introduced the term the national imagination, and especially its being not one but being many national imaginations. And that allows us, therefore, to arrive at our tentative positions of assemblage. I don't even call it agreement today. Let this be a plurality of differences, but we arrive at it from our multiple grassroots. And now why is this different? This is different because calling something Indian political theory, that just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Because if I am able to set up the time experiment to around 1910, 11, 12, 13, when the first print magazines were just about evocatively bringing up things, this wasn't Indian at all. And I think my greatest sense of the national imaginary came through language, poetry. But one young man called Bhagat Singh is writing something as an IA student called My Language and Its Script, Punjabi Bhasha Ani Lipicha Samasya, that gets translated into Marathi. Where do I find this essay? In the Kolhapur University Library that we all know very much, what a role it had to play in the life of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. So I think the many plural pathways that exist in our mufassils and in our provincial locations, does that allow us to come to political theory in its tentative assemblage of concepts? Even if we can't have a theory, we'd be happy to have some way of describing ourselves better in the world that is aggressively capitalist.
That's like, say, parallel question, doing theory, doing math in India is very different from doing math in other Bulgaria or somewhere else. So I wanted to understand what it meant, what the presupposition in your title was, doing theory in India. So I want to say that I am just as a background, I am a theoretical linguist, and I look at the relationship between language and thought, belief, intention, and emotion. So those are the areas that I theorize, and that means, of course, that you have to have a body which you are processing your thoughts through. My question for you is a rather simple one. In almost all theories that I have, discussions about theory that I've come across in India, the people say, we want to go beyond theory, beyond this, beyond that. And this is not surprising because para is a very common word in paribhasha, going beyond and so on. So this, I understand the notion of the other, or para, is built into the vocabulary or the thought processes in India. I want to ask you a question which relates to say, going beyond X and Y, that's fine. But supposing I were to give you, because I've theorized these things myself, and I believe personally that even in contexts where you don't have universities or large theory houses, you will still have narrative and metaphor as foundational ways of theorizing the world, because narrative is a species of natural theory. You explain things through narrative. So I want to force you to answer a question, and that is to explain without narrative or metaphor. If I gave you give you a forced choice, there are 4 types of, roughly in my understanding, theory. The first category is, let's say, theories which are explanatory, which are traditional physics, chemistry, linguistics, and so on. They have phenomena in the world, and they seek to describe the laws behind these theories. And that is a very traditional kind of theorizing. Next, there are elaborative theories which you seek to interpret the world. These kinds of theories are only weakly predictive, and they seek to interpret the world. The third type of theory is ecumenical theory, which deals with oughts and is, so legal oughts and shoulds. And those are like legal theories, religious theories, and so on. The fourth type of theory is what I would call emancipatory theory, which political scientists deal with. This is my classification. And emancipatory theories deal with liberation, political moksha is an emancipatory theory, but political theories like freedom of thought, of action, and so on. If I were to give you a forced choice, Indians will say, I have 10 hands, I want to do all of this. But if I were to ask you, which of these categories would individually you want to place yourself in, how would you answer?
You want to answer right now? Just wait. Thank you very much. Yeah, next. Yeah. Then you're clear.
Hi everyone, my name is Sanjum. My question is really simple. Since I think the foreign theories that were discussed, that we are rejecting somewhat, do not get into the caste complexities that are in there in India. And I hate to say it, but I have tried to study the caste complexities through their lens and I hate it. How do you think the creative theory gets into the caste dynamic complexities that are deeply rooted in Indian diaspora? Thank you very much.
So much for the lecture. It was very interesting. I am Aparna. I am associated Women's Studies Center of Jamia Millia Islamia. So while I was listening all this and the concept note also that has been shared with us, so I was thinking doing theory in South Asia, especially a country like India, I think it is more about understanding theory as situated knowledge. And when we think about considering theory as situated knowledge, I think there is a great challenge of imposter syndrome among scholars who are researching marginalized with marginalized communities or within these communities. So, and it is not only about using theories or citing theories, basically Western theories, but it is more about the language of research, the positivist approach, the methodology, and other conceptual things also. So I think when we are doing theory, and especially political theory in India, and that too is creative, I think there's a great challenge how we can think about not only it is about beyond, and when we are doing and rather thinking in terms of sort of including all these kind of situated knowledge, how we can conceptualize this Indian theory or doing Indian theory in a way so that we can also consider situated knowledge as a knowledge that can also help, like Dalit studies or feminist studies. These studies are basically helping, I think, to build this kind of theoretical conception, as Professor Savita also mentioned, that alienation and other kind of creative theories. But how we can also cite Western thinkers, likewise we can also cite thinkers who are Indian thinkers. And then we can think about writing in a way so that the scholar, if it is not autobiographical knowledge, obviously, if shared critical knowledge could also be a theoretical standpoint. So do we have a space to think about this imposter syndrome and how we can build a structure, supportive structure, so that we can also think about these marginalized scholars who are coming from marginalized community.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, next and then I'll come.
Good evening. I'm Mallikarjun from IIT. Adding to a lot of questions about creativity and creative theory that people are asking, I would just venture to ask if the panel could give an example of how analysis or what is at stake if we use normal theory and versus creative theory, which would just help us show that we can't do without the creative part of creative theory. The second is that what is the theory of human nature that informs the entire theoretical endeavor? Because this would tell us what is the understanding of freedom that one is pursuing. And thirdly, the point that a theory without teleology, which Professor Dhananjay mentioned, I would venture to ask, like, isn't there also an issue that modernity is sort of has put us in a state of this aimless wandering, and there is a lot of fatigue and paralysis that is born out of it, of not having final causes, in fact. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
So, my name is Kartar Kapoor. I'm a student of comparative studies and evolution of history of all sorts, sir. मैं हिंदी इंग्लिश में दोनों बोलना चाहूँगा सर. सबसे पहले मैं ठाकुर जी से मुखातिब हूँ। उन्होंने बोरोड कॉन्सेप्ट की बात की। सब कॉन्सेप्ट इज गुड फॉर ऑल, गुड फॉर एवरीथिंग, तो उसको रिजेक्ट करने का कोई सवाल नहीं उठता। वी शुड एक्सेप्ट इट। दूसरी बात जो आपने बहुत अहम कही, वो कही कॉमन इथोस ऑफ ह्यूमैनिटी। इट इज़ वेरी टचिंग टू मी सर। द कॉमन इथोस ऑफ ह्यूमैनिटी कभी भी कंप्लीटली हो सकता है। अभी यूनिवर्सल ट्राइबल आदिवासी इथोस और कॉमन इथोस ऑफ आदिवासी वर्ड ओवर को हम कंसीडर नहीं करते, जिसको सारे स्कॉलर, सारे फिलोसफर, सारी यूनिवर्सिटीज कोई भी इसको टेकअप नहीं कर रहा, जिसको इट्स वेरी सब्जेक्टिव, वेरी डियर टू मी। इथोस आर ह्यूमन इथोस आर आदिवासी इथोस, विच स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम आदिवासी से हमारा शुरुआत हुआ है, यहाँ तक पहुँचे हैं, उनकी हम बात ही नहीं करते। दूसरी बात मैं आपसे ये कहना चाहूँगा सर जी, क्या मीडिया के बिना हम चल सकते हैं? मीडिया मासिस को कंट्रोल करता है, और मीडिया को कौन कंट्रोल करता है? हम यहाँ बैठ के क्या कर रहे हैं? जो कुछ भी हम करेंगे मीडिया उसको नलिफाई कर देता है। मीडिया इज कंट्रोलिंग द माइंड्स ऑफ द पीपल, राइट? एंड हु कंट्रोल्स द माइंड? मीडिया। सो एवरीथिंग इज ऑफ, तो दैट इज देयर। दूसरी बात, सविता जी ने एक बात कही, पॉवर्टी ऑफ पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी, हाउ टू बी फ्री। मैं तो फ्रीडम का क्या मतलब है? जब जेब में पैसा नहीं है, काहे की फ्रीडम, काहे की थ्योरी, किस बात की? मेरी जेब में, जिनकी जेब में पैसा है वो ठीक है, उनकी फ्रीडम है। आई से नो फ्रीडम इज कंप्लीट विदाउट पैसा थ्योरी। पैसा का जब तक जेब में पैसा नहीं है, पैसे की फ्रीडम नहीं है, तो किसी को भी फ्रीडम कंप्लीट नहीं है। लोगों को पैसा दो, उनको फ्रीडम नहीं चाहिए, उनको खाना चाहिए, उनको घूमना चाहिए, उनको ऐश चाहिए, उनको दुनिया में जाना चाहिए, उनको यूनिवर्सिटी जाना है, बिना पैसे के कुछ नहीं मिलता।
Thank you.
But my last to be, सर सर ने यहाँ से कहा है कि the recovery, लाल जी, you don't want to be, blown off by my feet, sir, blown off my feet. गांधी जी ने कहा blown off, I don't want to be blown off my feet. They let the culture go from all sides, come to my window and pass through my doors. Sir जी, it's a global village में, how can you be on your feet? There's a wind blowing for all directions, from all sorts. You cannot be on your feet. This is old concept. Gandhi is great, right? I respect him. But जैसा नहीं, वो बड़ा आदमी है तो उसने कह दिया तो हम उसको एक्सेप्ट करें। हमारे में हिम्मत होनी चाहिए कहने, we can't remain on our feet. We have to be blown off. Thank you.
Where does this start?
All right, diverse questions, very, very different kinds of questions have been asked. I think what we are trying to do as creative theory at one level, perhaps it was too abstract. I can understand that theorizing, no matter how skeptical you get at the level of theory, this abstract level is what resolves our questions, theoretical questions. So, theory, the creative theory that we are doing is a very complex kind of exercise. Somebody asked 4 types of exercises of theories that one does. In creative theory, we accept all these theories. They're all part of our consideration, and I would say that there is a totality to which we are wedded. But how level that is also invoked, it is very, very important aspect, layer of our theory. Manindra in the beginning has mentioned that we take literature very seriously, we take literature as our archives. We don't take so much, we as creative theorists, we want to lean on literature very, very much, and less on our social sciences, because for a very long time they have been replicative, and in that sense they have not generated the kind of knowledge we need to go further. So it is a complex task, and I don't think we disregard in any sense theoretical practices that are exercised in other disciplines. Sujata was talking about medicine. Sujata, you know, you've been part of creative theory. We have also invited you to speak. You are not excluded. every time we invite you, and we take it very seriously, whatever you are presenting. So it's all under consideration. What creative theory specifically does is that it wants to go further. It wants to create new ideas. It wants to transform the things that we already know, and we don't devalue what we know, but we want to create more, something very specific to our own context, our own philosophies. Like, let me tell you this, that we do want to go out of that phase of Manuvad, where things are defined for you, the things are given to you as structures within which you have to function. We want to go beyond that. We want to come into our modern self in such a way that we are not even conditioned by modernity and its rationality to that extent. So it is this. It's a very complex thing that we're doing. Perhaps it is not making sense to you all right now. And we spoke only for 15-17 minutes in which we tried to explain what we're doing. The very fact that we are seeking an ontological thematization, it's a very, very difficult and important task. And we are not answerable only to this group. We are working with international philosophers and theorists, and we sort of discuss these matters even there. And these concepts are tested, they're challenged. We want to have challenges so that we sort of progress. So this is what we're doing. It's a kind of we are in a theoretically vulnerable position, but we are strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Hilal.
Yeah, thank you very much. It would be interesting to theorize this event itself and look at the presentation as well as the questions which you get. Usually, and this is my experience over the years, I get 3 types of questions. No question about what I say, what I do, rather 3 types of questions. So the first question is technical professional, who said what when type. इसमें वो कहाँ है, वो वाला आदमी क्यों नहीं गिराया आपने? That's one. The second is, which I call FAQ types. The madam's question was like that. She gave us 4 options. Now, अरे हम SIR में भी 4 option पे नहीं जा रहे हैं. There is a long debate. So don't give us options. Take what we have presented. We worked hard on that. And then it will be next to impossible to, you are saying that either yes or no. How would I say yes or no? This is absolutely absurd. Now the final type of questions which we get are not basically question alternative papers. Because people would actually, and we come from a very talkative society, which is our strength as well as weakness, and that's my famous example, that's maybe the reason why from Mahatma Buddha to Mahatma Gandhi, everyone say, chup raho. We speak a lot, but I think it would be better. So instead of answering, the questions which are raised, most of the questions were basically comments. So how should I respond to the comments? I take it, and I'm personally very disappointed. Thank you.
Okay. Dhananjay.
Intended meaning and extended meaning both are very important for us, I think. And collective theory is a collective pursuit in which experiential epistemology along with the various forms of epistemology or empathetic epistemologies are going to play very, very important. And I think teleological, I use that, telos have become very important in contemporary time. And I don't think telos have origin in modernity and modern time. They are pre-modernity also. I mean, look at the caste structure, very much teleological. I mean, or any structure which is getting sanctioned from theological positions. I mean, so I think in that sense that if creativity is not countering teleological or theological subsumptions, that there's a limit to human expression, that is bad in itself. So whether it is theological or whether it's capitalism, both are constraining factor in terms of defining creative theory or human creativity per se. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm not. I want to agree with Hilal. I think I really received wonderful questions, and let me try to address them one by one.
There are questions. Not true that there are no questions.
Like this question of theory and political theory, Sujata, I think we have been debating about this, and in this group probably we do not think that we are political theorists that way. It's creative theory is reflecting on political theory, but we are talking of theory in general. We are talking of theory in terms of understanding our reality, and we think that, as Narendra said, that all human beings are theory-making beings in a vague, in a very vague term, may not be very defined term, and probably in different linguistic communities, we have done it differently. Like for instance, I give you an example from Mahabharata. Just before the war, Dhritarashtra calls Vidur, and asks him why there is a war. And he says, because you have done injustice. He said, what is justice? He said, something that you don't want for yourself, you should not do it for others. I think it's a very theoretical statement. So maybe all such things are embedded in the narratives. So how do we make sense of ourselves, and how do we think of doing things, what you said, how do we move from tattva to vyavhara? And vyavhara could be different, but how do we also move from vyavhara to the tattva? This to and fro movement probably is the theoretical process that we are involved. The other question you talked about is the language and the category, and that is the struggle. That is where we think, and this CTC we are planning to work on and actually develop an idea how to deal with this issue. For instance, there is one session on shram, labor and mazdoor. These are three different categories, and they have three different meanings. So what meaning, what words should we use, what concept should we use? This is not a simple choice. I'm sure it's it has to be a very informed choice. So probably this is, in India particularly, and that's Rukmini Bhai, that in India particularly doing theory would mean dealing with this complexity of multiple language, multiple experiences, multiple communities. For instance, tribal communities, multiple languages. They also, one of my students has worked on Urav as an epistemic community. How do they make sense of the world? So probably that is a struggle that we have to get involved in, and that is a struggle of doing theory in India. Manisha, I think when we say creative, that doesn't mean that we are creating a binary between creative and critical. I'm only suggesting that being critical is extremely important. That gives us the ground for thinking something new, going beyond probably is our concern all the time, going beyond what is available, creating something new that can give us better understanding of things, both explanation and maybe a perspective, what to do next, where to go from there. Only being critical, for instance, capitalism. We have been critical to capitalism. The question is, what are the alternatives now? No matter how much critique we are giving, finally we are reduced to China fact. There is no alternative, therefore we are moving with this. A thinker like Gandhi gave a critique and simultaneously gave an alternative. Not alternative to something, but a new model, which could be a more human model, which could be a model that can make the world better. For instance, we are working on several such experiments at the grassroots level. What are the new ways of organizing our relation with nature people are experimenting with? For instance, there is a Mondragon experiment, which is a wonderful experiment. We are trying to see what could be done there. So critical is definitely there. On the global south thing, I have a question. this idea of global south, no matter how much we assert, it remains alternative to global north. So north is powerful, south is not powerful, therefore we are asserting. I want to get rid of that psychology. And this is a psychology that doesn't allow me to think at the global level. So I would think of a theory that can explain the problems of US or European world also. And we can think of a larger model which could be applicable everywhere. So the global south has an inherent understanding that we are inferior, we are asserting. So this is what Hilal calls the victimhood psychology. I want to get rid of that psychology because that limits my thought process. Rukmini, I think this is an excellent categorization. 4 ways of doing theory and a difficult choice. But if you push me very hard that you have to take one of them, then I will take the last one. The last one, the emancipatory theory. The purpose of our theory is to work out a model, think how do we...
Once you do that, once you make that choice, you realize
Okay.
the limitations of taking a position. I mean, at all. In that way.
Right, we will discuss. I think please do come for our colloquium. In the first session itself, we will have very interesting debate. Gopal, Guru and Peter have agreed. And I have read your book, an excellent collection of those concepts from Indian tradition. Right, so I think that would be really interesting if you also come and participate in that discussion. So I would say that creative theory is about struggle for a better world. And therefore the last point I made was that we have to struggle for a new utopia so that people get energy. But 2 more minutes. Okay. Just 2 more minutes.
8 o'clock already, but a few more.
Can you give me 2 more minutes? Just, or at least, I think what is human nature? That's a big debate that we would like to enter. And I think, this is one of my favorite topics these days, that if we want to do theory, we probably have to begin from human nature. A lot of friends say that that's not needed, but I think that's needed. Now, I take this Purusharth model, Purusharth and Vikar together, as a wonderful model which can help us in theorizing a lot of things. So that would be my answer to you. And the borrowed concept, I don't think borrowing any concept has a problem, but when we are borrowing, we have to really know why are we borrowing. So as I said, all resources produced by every human being is a collective resource of humanity. From there, we have to extract things for ourselves, for our struggle, for the next 100 years, how do we think about our world? That's the role of a theory. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You must also distinguish among them, what is the goal, what is normative and all that. I think we're familiar with that. There is a new situation or a new question to which existing explanations are not adequate. Class will automatically dissolve caste, we were told. But that didn't happen. That's why we wanted to go deeper. Is there a material basis for caste? Ideological basis, material basis. So we tried to connect class and caste. And we were criticized. You people, you are new left or whatever, you forget class analysis, you are going for caste analysis. Similarly. So there is something, the normal theory which has been received is not able to explain fully, convince fully, identify the normative goal fully, is not taking me from one step to another in terms of emancipation. Now that's why you have to find some new things. And that is the creative attempt. In other words, something which is not fully explained, fully realized, and fully unlaced, fully opened up. That is where creative theory comes. If creative theory becomes normal theory, at some point you will discover that normal theory has again some dissatisfaction, some problem. So creative theory is a continuous process. And that is why when we say creative theory, we assume that the political economy of power is built into it. I mean, what we are saying is the basis of power is not fully explained by the existing theories. So we are trying to find intersectionality. Today I'm talking about beyond intersectionality. In the name of intersectionality, an empiricist conglomerate, all these things are important. No, all these things are important, but contextual specificity of a situation may give you some principality. That is forgotten by many intersectional theories. But intersectional theory was a great advance over any one-dimensional theory. So that is why it's a continuous process. So I wish creative theory becomes normal theory, but then also you will need further pursuit of creative theory. Thank you all very much. That was great.
Dr. Maninder Thakur for his inaugural remarks, and all the panelists, Professor Sabita Singh, Professor Bilal, and Dr. Dhananjay Rai for such a thought-provoking, enriching and academic discussion on doing theory in India. Above all, I would like to thank the audience. We also take the opportunity to thank the Director of the IIC, Shri K.N. Srivastava, Program Communication Officer, Shubhra Tandon and her team, Smriti Maluta and Sandeep Biswas, and the technical staff of IIC. Our next event is scheduled for 21st of August on Decoding Bangladesh, conference room at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I really enjoyed the... Thank you. It has given me certain...